Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Timeout with Tackle What's Next, where we chat with athletes and executives about how sport has made a difference and changed the course of their lives and the lessons they've learned in life outside of the game. I'm your host, Danielle Berman. I am the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next, where we help athletes create impact outside of the game and find their purpose in life after sports. So thanks for joining us here at Timeout with Tackle What's Next. It's been a crazy week, so I hope this can be a nice distraction for everyone. Before I introduce our guest, I just want to say it's been really great to see so many athletes advocate for change this week, and we've seen such really awesome voter turnout because of that. So I just wanted to make sure I recognize everything all these athletes are doing across the sports landscape to get people out to the polls. So let's get back to today's timeout. Today we are talking to JT Thomas. He is a former NFL player. He founded his own foundation, the JT Thomas Foundation, and now he works as a consultant and investor. His foundation strives to empower the next generation, in South Florida through education, leadership, and safety among youth sports. And he's also been recently an accredited investor and has done a lot of work in that area. JT played in the NFL for 7 seasons with the Bears, the Jaguars, and most recently the New York Giants. And he completed his MBA at the University of Miami during his last couple NFL seasons, which is where we crossed paths. So I see JT on. I'm going to bring him on screen, and we will get this conversation going. Hey, JT.
Hello.
How are you?
Good to see you. Long
Good
time
to
no see.
see
How
you
have you
too.
been?
Absolutely. Been good. How have you been?
I've been great. I can't complain, man. I'm in sunny South Florida, and I'm just starting to realize how much being born in a paradise, so to speak, down here. But how clutch that's been for me later on in life. You don't appreciate it until later, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can certainly say I miss South Florida a lot. Back up here in Maryland where it's like 40 degrees now. I'm pretty cold. Today it was nicer, but this morning it was like 35 degrees and I'm like, man, I miss Miami a lot. So
Yeah. And we're almost in season down here, you know. Every year between November and February, the snowbirds come down. So we get our fair share of New Yorkers, people from Chicago. Everyone comes down to South Florida. And once again, just being born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that's just been such a blessing for me.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to just start off with what have you been up to? You've been out of the league for a couple years now. What have you been doing and putting your time into? And especially this year, how have you been keeping busy in 2020?
Well, I spent that time there maybe a year or two trying my best to get back into the NFL. And for everyone who has had an opportunity to play in the NFL, being outside, you're kind of like, out of your space, your comfort zone in the sense of being around guys, having a lot of energy to bounce off of. And the toughest part began to be being able to motivate yourself and put yourself as much as another person could, being outside of the league there for a second. So around 2020, even earlier this year, was my official year of retiring.
Mm.
Finally decided that my body can't do it anymore. I've played this, all I can, man, and now this game here, playing the market is a lot easier than playing against some of those 300-pounders that I'm used to seeing game day.
I'm sure, yeah. And what was that decision like? I mean, I know it's a tough decision, but did you already have things in the works in terms of what you were going to get involved in once you officially made that retirement decision?
Yeah, well, you begin to realize that nothing really changes in the sense of I'm still an independent contractor, essentially like I was when I was an NFL player. And now it's just tackling deals instead of guys to be able to chase around the field. But for everyone who has a chance to be a business person or entrepreneur, they understand that it's as, if not more competitive as it was than playing on the football field, being that you got so much support. You really don't understand the value of those resources until they aren't as readily available. Just being able to see both sides is a blessing, being able to have the benefits of be able to play in the NFL, and then taking a few bumps and bruises along the way as an entrepreneur while in the NFL, so that playing or being in business after wasn't such a huge transition. It's like I've been the same kind of person in the sense of looking for areas of improvement, whether that be when I was on the football team or when I'm specking out businesses to try and sell services to. So, it's one of those things where it's all correlated: leadership, business, sports.
Yeah, and you mentioned just taking advantage of resources. You completed your MBA while you were playing in the NFL. Why did you decide to do that, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, a lot of it was kind of fate, and there was that divineness to it in the sense of my buddy David Tyree. Everyone remembers him for the catch, but he actually tapped me on the shoulder with that same hand in the locker room as a Giant, and told me a little about the MBA program. And I had tried my best at business myself, just trying to figure it out the hard way, and was just hitting a few roadblocks. It got jammed up in a few bad deals, and you learn your lesson and you go back and get some formal education, and that's what I would recommend to anyone trying to be a business person. That MBA really opened my eyes a little bit and really helped me hone in on some of the things that were even I felt were a little bit more valuable, or a little bit more valuable than what I was pursuing back when I was in business as a player.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to go back now to your early sports experiences as a young kid growing up. When did you first start playing sports, and how did you choose football?
Well, uh, once again, born and raised in sunny South Florida, man, Fort Lauderdale. It's one of those things where in my community, you usually play sports, or you understand, how to be a little bit more talented in other ways. Not so many doctors and lawyers. You get to see a few business people growing up, but sports was really a haven for us, a safe place. The park, I was a park baby, in the sense of, some guys would stand on the corner, I was the guy that was at the park at the end of the day. A lot of competing going on. The only place I was going to rough you up was mainly in between those lines, you know what I mean? And being able to be exposed to the game from a youth from my family, just seeing dolls and mannequins of my uncles playing back in the day and hearing how hard my dad would hit people back in the day or how well he played quarterback, it really made me aspire to want to try to accomplish something in the arena of sports. And then, education was a must in our household with growing up, being raised by my mom in South Florida, to where that became a prerequisite to sports, to where it became second nature for me and in my DNA to want to excel in the classroom as well. It was like my past in order to be able to play on the field. And I remember it being really natural, something that we would do every weekend in my household, even more so than church. You know what I mean? That's I just I would advise you to have a little bit more balance in your approach. Coming out of where we come from in the inner city and in underserved communities, and we have that all or nothing approach when it comes to sports and it being our vessel out. But you get out here and you realize there's tons of ways to be able to succeed in, and that football isn't the only way. And that's the message I try and preach to the youth so that they're as equipped as their counterparts are, whether that be institutions or different organizations in the league.
Yeah, and speaking of youth, you started the JT Thomas Foundation. Tell us why you thought that was really important to create, and what are you guys doing right now, especially to support young kids, especially in South Florida, through sports during a pandemic?
Well, we've always been a little bit more focused on the youth, especially while I was in the league. And, the workload of the league really was divided between that and me serving the community, whereas now, having a little bit more time, I've really been using that time to strategize and to plan and try to figure out how to be most efficient in helping my community. Because having volunteered my time at my youth football program that I grew up playing at, I get a chance to see some of the needs of the community up close. It's not the stuff that people are talking about as they're, analyzing the game on TV or the people up in the classrooms. You get to see some of the real problems that the kids have. Everything becomes a threat to their well-being, whether it be public safety or communicating and resolving issues with the police. It's one of those days where even while playing the game, I started to really open my eyes a little bit later in the game and to realize that there were issues much bigger than sports that just seemed a little bit more apparent to me than ever the older I got and the more wise I feel like I became as a player and a young man.
Yeah, and I think some of the things you guys have been doing are camps, but also outside of that. So you mentioned the leadership being really important. So it's great that you're passing that along to the next generation of kids coming up, through sports and outside of that. I wanted to ask you what skills that you learned from sports, whether it's football or another sport that you played, are there any of those skills that you're still using today in some of the work you're doing with the foundation and with the business opportunities?
For sure, and that's how I try to align, everything that I'm involved in, so that it's really natural for me to be able to provide some value to, in the sense of the things that are synonymous across all platforms, whether it's sports, business. You're always going to have leadership involved in it, right? You're always going to have things like performance involved in it, right? And my mantra, getting better every day and stay ready. All those things correlate to training and preparation and the mentality that you have to do things that may not feel as good while you're doing it, like practice,
Mm-hmm.
like bookkeeping, right? And to be able to work your way to developing your strengths, your weaknesses, so that you're whether you're a comprehensive business or a business plan, or you're a well-sound and well-coached ball club. It's one of those things where leadership, performance, development, getting better every day, those things correlate to business and sports.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think you're right. That stay ready and just get day, like especially I think we've all learned that you have to stay ready and you just got to try and do your best every day and get better. So I think those are great mantras to pass on to others as well. Is there anything that you did in particular as you were coming up through either college or the professional world that you would want to share with other athletes, something that they should be doing if they're thinking about transition, or maybe something you didn't do that you wish you did that would have better prepared you?
Well, I say, you touched on it a little bit, in recognizing that nothing stays the same. Throughout my career, in high school, I had 4 head coaches.
Mm.
There in college, we lost a great coach in Rich Rodriguez and replaced by another in Bill Stewart. In the league, you lose your coach, you lose your GM, you're probably going to be going next. It's one of those things where, you kind of have to get used to being uncomfortable.
Mm.
And all the things that are great require that sense of uncomfortability, and since if it feels like it's taking an extra effort, if it feels like it's hard, you're definitely in the right place, you're doing the right thing. And to be prepared, for that unexpected. For players on the field, it's injury, something that I faced, and that sense of adversity, and man, it can be real testing. Get a chance to test your faith along with other things like your ability to perform at a high level, and that's where you have an opportunity to build your character. I
Mm.
always felt like the game of football was a game that really revealed your character. You got a chance to see who people truly were in times of crisis. You got a chance to see who people were when the cars were up. So for me, man, I'm an enthusiast. I love the game. I mean, literally, I think it's one of the most beautiful things in the world, right? So for the game to end for me, to be able to find ways to be able to appreciate it that are outside yourself, when you can enjoy it like you used to, it just brings another level of maturity and leadership, like those things that we spoke about earlier. So, I mean, I would just say to, because I'm not trying to, I don't want to keep saying the same thing in a sense of stay ready, but be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for injury. Be prepared for loyalty issues within your circle, whether it be your family or friend. Be prepared for those things, and almost treat them the same. I've heard that from a great coach, Gus Bradley, in the sense of saying treat both imposters the same, success and failure. The
Mm.
way, I've learned through being able to relax and do things like golf that help me focus and kind of quiet the noise. That a lot of times you can find yourself overreacting or overstimulating in the sense of trying to compensate for things that you might not necessarily understand, like mental health.
Yeah.
Right, the way just having conversations about your well-being, has then led you to things like an increased performance on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
So, being prepared for change and able to adapt swiftly. And I would
Yeah.
say that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think it applies because, again, there's so much change that you can't control. And I like that you talked about finding things that work for you to focus and relax and just have that sense of clarity is really important, because especially when things change, you feel out of control, and that can be really, really hard to deal with. So that's great advice, just to be prepared for anything. And I love that quote about treating failure and success the same,
Mm-hmm.
preparing for both. So that's great. A couple more questions before I let you go. Tell us more about some of the things.
Like, if anything, you got to tell me how much time we got, because I get a little long.
We have a few, we have time. I just don't want to take your time.
No, no
Uh,
worries. You're
I,
fine.
I was going to just ask you about some of the business endeavors you're in, and what inspired you to start investing in some of these projects. Don't know what you can share with us, but would love to hear what you're doing, and how you got involved with that.
Well, I'll say it started with my mom, in the sense of outside of having us always keeping a steady job, she started to invest in other things like speculative deals in Florida. But that's back when we were running into that housing crisis of 2006 and to 2008. And I got a chance to live through some things that really helped me play the game today in the real estate space. And recognizing that that's just one asset class to the other alternative that I enjoy learning about as I make progress as an individual investor. So mom right off the bat, right? And then dad started to do things like small business ideas in Morgantown back when he was in college. So I come from a very entrepreneurial family. Watching my grandfather go to work for 30 years at the city of Fort Lauderdale. Watching my grandmother be able to work decades there at Publix. I'm glad we're able to sit her down now. You know what I mean?
Right.
More comfortably. But outside of doing things like being able to take care of your household from a financial standpoint, you look for areas to be able to contribute to the community in the same way. And these days, if you're overlooking some of the issues that are right in our face, you're almost as wrong as some of the powers that control some of the resources that aren't necessarily making it where they should. So I just felt like, there was a shift there somewhere in my career where I felt like my purpose was much bigger than the platform and the stage of football. And when you start to value yourself and your intellect and the people that you can motivate to do things like you've done, a little bit more than maybe running into guys, and I love the game. Love the game. People say, well, did you let your kid play? Yeah, I probably let him play if he wanted to, for sure. I get a chance to watch my little brother compete. I have a younger brother and two other little sisters. My younger brother, Jared, my little sister, Rocky. They're the world to me. Until I have kids of my own, I get a chance to live through them vicariously. And I just think it's all intertwined in the sense of whether it's sports, business, youth development, man. I think that what we're going through right now, as I make progress as an entrepreneur, is that things are much more overmanaged and underled. It's easy to make money. It's really about how you want to make that dollar. You know what I mean? And for me, it's trying to hit the triple bottom line. I want to make a profit, right? But want to make an impact as well. And if we can save Mother Nature and hit the triple bottom line, that's great too. We can. But it's one of those things where I'm just happy that I was able to inherit some of those ambitious and entrepreneur habits from mom and dad, to come from a family that cares enough to make sure that the kid gets up and go to school. And I know that was a huge blessing for me. I never take that for granted. I almost try to look for the kids who didn't quite have the kind of support that I was able to foster, and grow up with there, because I know it's not common in my community. I grew up essentially as an only child, and I'm one of the few people in my family who are the only child. It's just most of my cousins and relatives, man, they're by the boatloads. You know what I mean? And it sucks because, you see family, you see people in the community, you see the world at large, and you recognize, man, you won't be able to save everyone.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can do your part, man. You can try to keep your yard clean and have impact, but you have to recognize that the problems that we face are so big. If you try to address it all, you almost exhaust yourself. And how upset that we can, and even I can get, by some of the things that, I've experienced lately as a black man, whether that be, out here in the streets or, being ousted from the NFL, after taking a knee. Some of the things that, aren't as noticeable and surface level, but they're all things that have meaningful change in how you go about your business. So I've been thankful for that. It's all been blessings.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I love that you talked about, it's all well and good to make that money, but really it's about that extra bonus of how are you impacting the community. And I loved your point of you can't save everybody. You have to have some kind of focus to what you're doing. Otherwise, everything gets kind of diluted. So we want to make sure you have the one thing that's most important. And I think that's a really great piece of advice. I was going to ask you, how can athletes that might be thinking about what can I do to make change or create impact? I think that's a good piece of advice is just find your focus. But do you have any other pieces of advice for other athletes that are like, hey, I want to make an impact too?
You touched on it there briefly, and I appreciate you there. In the sense of understanding that you do have to narrow your focus and figure out what you're truly passionate about and how to best use your platform. For some people, it's their voice. I'm so thankful that God gave me the ability to articulate and to be able to express myself in ways that aren't as destructive as things can be and things can get if you don't know how to. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where identifying what you're truly passionate about. And for me, that's always been education, right? To where now we're trying to put together a charity golf tournament to be able to send kids from high school to college, and I think that's important in my community. But there's some more surface level things like just being able to do basic one-on-one mentorship and each one teach one and finding the kid to be able to support throughout their journey. So it's so many ways to be able to impact our community, whether it be from a leadership standpoint or the Black community. You have to be specific about how you want to affect change. Once again, it's education, leadership, and youth sports for us, and primarily education. That's the most important part. But as we transition into becoming a community development program, we recognize that there's things like economic development that need to be touched on, real estate development, being a part of master planning in the community, making sure you're a part of what they call gentrification, and not sitting on the outside of it,
Yep.
wishing you had taking advantage of some of the equity and ownership that we should have in the communities in our neighborhoods. Man, I just think that for guys, being one step out of the NFL, I'll see how hard it is just managing your time and being able to focus a little bit on the community because a lot of the things that the guys are exposed to is for the first time in their lives and their families' lives and their families' lives in the sense of now they're the richest person in their community. They're experiencing things at a fast pace. And sometimes serving gets put on the back burner. I'd encourage guys to get started sooner than later, because now I look up, we're 8 years, almost 10 years in, since starting the JT Thomas Foundation. I'm super proud of that, man. I really thank my mom. She helped me co-found it. And I really thank my wife and everyone in my family, my grandmother, my grandparents. It's a family. It becomes a family thing. And that kind of inspiration and affection is like kind of spreads. You hope to see other guys in the league do it. You have to see other business owners do it. It ain't just guys in the league who I'm trying to impact. It's anyone who's looking to improve themselves. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes athletes, sometimes the CEO, sometimes it's head coaches. But being able to help people and things improve, man, is what's important to me outside of education.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. And I think it is important that it's not just athletes leading the charge in the community, but that you guys are also using that platform, like you said, in the way that you can to inspire other people in the community to get involved as well and join the cause. So I think that's a really great point. We have time for like one more question. So I just want to throw to you, what's coming up for the foundation? You talked about a charity golf tournament. And how can people connect with you and get involved with some of these opportunities?
Well, you can follow me at JT3 on Instagram, of course. I'm always trying to give people updates and speak to beautiful people like yourself who understand what we're trying to accomplish in our community because, we need each other, so always trying to use that platform to communicate. There on my personal page, you'll see a tab for the JT Thomas Foundation with a button to donate this to our operating fund. But the specific things that we're doing is the charity golf tournament that I told you about, and I'm putting together a CDC to be able to do some transformational things in real estate in my hometown of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Very nice. That's awesome. And I think that's something that is really important and goes back to what you're saying about being involved in community changes and shifts, and the equity side of the community as well. So I think that's really important. So, JT, thank you so much for jumping on the call and chatting with us here at Timeout. This was so much fun. I'm glad to hear everything's going well. And I hope everyone that's watching and will watch this later gets a lot out of all the great advice that you shared here. So, again, follow JT here, JT3. We'll put some links in as we share some of these clips out. And thanks again, JT, for jumping on and supporting us at Tackle What's Next.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Look forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great night.
Take care.
Bye.